Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is doing everything but announcing his run for 2024, out with a new book, out with a new video paid for by his campaign committee. Let's have a brief clip of that, and I want to get your reaction.
We are the nation's fastest growing state. We rank #1 in education freedom. We are #1 in economic freedom. Florida also ranks #1 in public higher education. This is a record we can all be proud of.
That's why the left hates Governor DeSantis, because he's a winner. That's what the guy does. He wins.
Decline is a choice. Success is attainable. And freedom is worth fighting for.
That looks a lot like a video for a presidential candidate, Margaret Tlaib.
Did the music give you a clue also? This is the part of the silly part of the campaign season where everyone has the conversation that says, does this mean that Ron DeSantis is going to run? And the answer is yes, obviously. Why would you do any of these things if you weren't intending to run? The question is, what is the rollout? What's the timing of that announcement? How do you stage it? And we can see some clues from the ramp up of events around a book release and around his decision at this point not to participate in CPAC, because he doesn't have to. He's going to get his own coverage and differentiate himself from the pack.
Laura, Donald Trump clearly not comfortable with a Ron DeSantis candidacy. He's already trying out a bunch of nicknames for him and attacking him, saying that he's responsible for for DeSantis' success. How does that potential rivalry play out in any Republican primary? I mean, are other Republicans, do they see opportunity perhaps that DeSantis and Trump consume each other?
Potentially, but I think that a lot of the Republican strategists I've talked to think that the more candidates that jump in, the more that benefits the former President Trump. In particular with DeSantis, I mean, he is the biggest threat to the former president. And the former president does have some avenues to try to differentiate himself from DeSantis, particularly on something that we're hearing a lot about from President Biden right now, which is Medicare and Social Security. Trump did this last time around, pointing out that a lot of these Republicans supported potential cuts to entitlement, and DeSantis was one of them. And that's something that I think we could see be different little policy differences that the former president tries to point out, particularly with DeSantis.
Indeed. Laura Barron-Lopez, Margaret Tlaib, good to have you both on.
With me to share their reporting and their insights, Mariana Sotomayor of The Washington Post, CNN's Dana Bash, and Francesca Chambers of USA Today. It is interesting as others get into the race. DeSantis feels he has the luxury of doing a book tour first and then getting in, because if you look at the early polling, emphasis on early polling, he's up there with Donald Trump. Everybody else is way, 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 way behind.
Yeah, he's definitely wading the waters, and he can afford to do that right now. There's still time, even though we are in this world of very early political races. The interesting thing about DeSantis is there are a number of Republicans, including on Capitol Hill, who very much applauded the fact that he really blew it out of the water in his governor's reelection race. But the thing is as we saw in the midterms, and this is going to be an interesting thing as he's going around the country, Pennsylvania, Michigan, states that really were pivotal. A lot of Republican voters actually said, you know what, these people who are running like Trump, who are just focusing on the culture wars, that is a staple of DeSantis as governor. I have no idea yet if that's going to resonate in those places that really do elect a president at the end of the day.
I think that's a fascinating point in the sense that presidential primaries tend to litigate, and they're supposed to settle differences when a party's debating who are we, what are we for. DeSantis is interesting. He's just signing into law now this new law in Florida that allows him essentially to control Disney, to have some significant control over Disney. And listen to this in an interview with Mark Levin on Fox over the weekend. Again, he's promoting his new book, and he's talking about using government power against those who do things with whom you disagree.
If Wall Street banks will not give a loan to someone, say, in the firearm industry, that's effectively changing gun rights in America. They're not getting any votes to do that. They're not winning any elections to do that, but they're bringing power to bear in a way that does affect public policy.
Help me with the intellectual consistency question. Republicans say if you are a baker and you don't want to sell a cake or provide services to a gay wedding, that should be your right as an individual. Ron DeSantis there is saying if a bank decides it will not lend money to somebody with whom they have some disagreement, the government can step in and do something about it. Huh?
It's such a fascinating dichotomy / contradiction that we are going to see play out as part of the Republican nominating process. And that is, what does being a conservative actually mean? Does it mean the historic definition, which is keep government out of your life, maybe more leaning towards a libertarian? That is certainly what you're going to hear and see some of the candidates say. And you're going to hear them say that they're the true conservative, not the DeSantis wing or DeSantis himself, who says, I'm going to enforce the conservative ideals by using the government. It's absolutely, as I said, fascinating. I asked Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chair, to sort of try to litigate that. Of course, she wouldn't, because we do see that coming down the pike as one of the key questions.
You see it coming down the pike. The Club for Growth is one of the conservative groups that are calling people together, essentially cattle calls. They bring donors in, they bring potential candidates in, so people can try to impress to raise money. At the Club for Growth guest list includes Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Governor DeSantis, Mike Pompeo, Governor Youngkin of Virginia, Senator Tim Scott. I mean, there again, you have this debate about, it used to be, Ronald Reagan's Republican Party, to your point, was keep the government out as much as possible. Free market. Don't tell the private business what to do. Let them do their thing and have basic regulation. We're going to have a fascinating debate over DeSantis, who a lot of Trump voters will like that. Use your power to punish your enemies or punish those who cross you. But it's not free market conservatism.
But also notice who was left off that list, which is Donald Trump. The Club for Growth tells me he was not invited to this confab. So it does again show you how there are many Republicans who want to keep Trump's ideals, but they want to move on from Trumpism. But to your point, Dana, but what does that even mean at this point? Several of the Republican candidates or would-be candidates have really just struggled to define in the last couple of weeks how their policies would be different than Trump, how they would actually be different than Donald Trump. So I do think that that is going to be a key question that's facing many of these candidates is beyond January 6th, like what would you actually do that's different than Donald Trump and why you versus someone else on this stage?
And when we get them on a stage, thank you for the use of that term, August, the first planned Republican presidential primary debate. You mentioned your conversation with Chairwoman McDaniel. She was appointed by Trump. She's viewed by many in the party who don't like Trump as too close to Trump. She's clearly deciding to create some space or try to create some space with Donald Trump, including the idea, she says, if you want to be on the stage of a party-sponsored debate, you should sign a pledge promising that if you're not the nominee, you will support who is.
If you're going to be on the Republican National Committee debate stage, asking voters to support you, you should say, I'm going to support the voters and who they choose as the nominee. As RNC chair, if I said I wouldn't support the Republican nominee, I would be removed from office. Anybody getting on the Republican National Committee debate stage should be able to say, I will support the will of the voters and the eventual nominee of our party.
It worked, at least to a degree, in the sense that within an hour or so after that interview, Trump's campaign said, of course, released a statement saying, of course, we'll support the Republican nominee because it will be me.
Right.
But in a way, she at least got him halfway there.
Yes, obviously Donald Trump and the question about him and his loyalty is one of the sort of factors in the equation. It hasn't been tested because the first time Republicans signed this was in 2016 because of the sort of consternation about Donald Trump as the potential nominee. It wasn't tested because he became the nominee. Now it's so multifaceted because it's not just about Donald Trump and who will he support. It's even more importantly, the other candidates, especially those who have said very explicitly, Donald Trump should not be president again. He is not qualified. He tried to overthrow the government. How can I sign a pledge supporting his candidacy? You're asking me to put party over country, and I don't feel comfortable with that. That is one of the open questions about what those candidates will do.
And so do they want people to actually sign, pen to paper, all of them?
Well, and some Republicans tell me that they don't see this as enforceable. Sure, you sign it, you get on the debate stage, but after that, if you're not the nominee, what's to actually make you support Donald Trump? Of course, your own truthfulness, your own conscience, of course, is what one of the Republican potential candidates, Asa Hutchinson, told me is that you have your own word there that you have to look at, but they see it as a potential impediment for getting more people on the debate stage is having to write a quote-unquote blank check, as he called it, to support the eventual nominee.
So I'm trying to think who would be in the group of people who would not sign such a thing. Liz Cheney, maybe Larry Hogan, who might run. Anyone else?
Chris Christie.
Chris Christie. Yeah, all right, we'll see how that list grows.